Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point. We are here today, I am here today, with a brand new Into the Dark tier list in preparation for KTO, which is when this comes out. KTO will be the coming weekend, so it's coming in the coming days for you listening right now. And I just really have been playing a lot of Into the Dark, and I've played a stupid amount of games of Into the Dark in the past month. So I want to use this time to put out a tier list, and then because the people love tier lists. First of all, it's just instrumental, and second, it's fun to do these right before big events. I would have done one before LVO, but I just wasn't super up to like a good standard that I felt on the meta, understanding the meta. To a point where I wanted to put out a video. But this time around, I feel a little bit better. I feel like I have a decent understanding. So let's get the first things out of the way. Same as always, we have the Shadow Realm here. This is the Compendium. We're not going to be ranking the Compendium teams. Just because the Shadow Realm's down here doesn't mean it's worse than this. I've also repurposed the tiers. So we're not doing S tier, A tier, B tier anymore. There's a little bit more explanation in these, which is always nice. So it's a little bit harder to, see something in like D tier and get really angry or something. But if you really like the letters, it's S, A, B, C, D. There you go. There's not really an F tier. I don't think F tier really exists when you're not counting compendium teams. So yeah, and on top of that, the Exaction Squad and Hand of the Archon aren't they're too new, really, for me to have like a ranking for them. They're not even going to be out by KTO, so they're not getting ranked. But everything else here is. So I mean, let's just go through it. Let's start with. I guess we'll do it and we'll go up. So we'll start with the firmly under the curve but not unplayable. So this is like. I don't think there's an unplayable team in the game right now, like a really bad, like mediocre. I guess no, there's definitely mediocre, but there's not like an unplayable, horrible bespoke team in the game. There's some pretty bad ones, relatively speaking, but I think like with a lot of practice, somebody can do well with just about any team. I mean, we saw Kasserkin place 11th at LVO like 2 weeks ago, so yeah, there's nothing like that. So starting with the firmly under the curve but not unplayable. Let's start with, where are they? There they are. Hyrotech Circle. So I'm really not a fan of Hyrotech Circle right now. They did get buffed, and the buffs are nice, sure, but I think the team is still fundamentally missing something. They're effectively an elite team. They have like 6 contributing models, 2 of which are kind of like more support than offensive. And then they have 2 little Griblies that just are pure support that actually can't do anything other than that. The problem is if you look at them like an elite team, they're like a really bad elite team. Like they're APL2, they're slow. You need to use ploys to like speed them up. They're just like really underwhelming. And they're also like, as far as a team that's not good, they aren't easy to play either, which I don't normally account for that in the tier lists, but something has to be said for the fact that they are both hard to learn and pretty unrewarding to once you play them at the top level. So they're probably the worst team in my eyes. Next up, though, on the firmly under the curve tier, we're gonna slide on over to a team I just mentioned, if I can find them. No, that's not them. Where are they? There they are. That's Kasserkin. So I think Kasserkin are a little bit better than Hyrotech, which is why I have them above. But and that's evidenced by the fact they just did pretty well at LVO. The problem is they have such a massive matchup disparity. Like I think they have some game into elite teams to some degree. I think Intercession is still kind of brutal for them, but like into like Legionaries or Phobos or something, I think that they can punch through that power armor really well. But they run into issues when they're playing any team with like a similar amount of bodies or more. Their dice just aren't reliable enough to be like taking down multiple things all the time. They don't have enough elite points because the problem is their shooting is unreliable enough at a base level against pretty much anything So like you can use the elite points to get like really good results, which is clutch against elite things because you don't have that many things you need to kill. But when there's like 12 things in the board and you're still needing to use those elite points just to like get some reliability against like even like a 7 wound thing, that's when you kind of start to run into problems. They just don't have like a deep enough toolbox to deal with like the spread of teams in the meta, in my opinion. So I guess moving on, I do think those are the two worst teams right now. Sorry, Shadow Vaults, but you really undersold us a little bit on the power level here. So let's move on to the could use some tweaks tier. So this is kind of a tough one because I feel like it's really easy to look at certain teams and identify them as being a little under the curve when in actuality they're fine, and it's like they look worse because of the really good teams, and then like comparing them to the teams that actually are slightly under the curve. So this might be kind of a controversial opinion, but I think Commandos are a little bit under the curve. I think when Into the Dark first came out, before they like errataed some of the abilities, Commandos were like borderline broken on some missions. But I think once they fixed that and then Crit Ops came out, they just don't quite have the same like objective pressure that they did before. And I think in general, and this goes for open board too, I think Commandos are just a little bit under the curve. I know they're struggling in win rates, which I don't usually care about win rates that much, but they're also not doing amazingly in podiums. Much better than these two teams, in my opinion, though. I think with Commandos, you can play them really well and perform well with them. And, if you're experienced on the team, you can absolutely make them work. But not a huge fan, personally, as far as the tier list goes. I'm putting them here. I think they do need a little bit of help. I don't know if they're going to get it, but I think they could use that. They're really close to being like balanced, though. Honestly, I'm just putting them here. All right, next up, Phobos, who I think are worse than Commandos, flat out. And I think there are some people who would probably put them into the bottom category. I'm not going to do that. I think they're like a notch above the bottom category. I mentioned with higher tech, you can get really, really good with them, and it's kind of unrewarding. I think Phobos, you can get really, really good with them, and it's like a little rewarding. Like you'd still be better off doing like almost any other like elite team. Well, literally other than Compendium, any other elite team. But overall, they're kind of like running into the same issue, like the opposite issue that Caster can run into, where like I think Phobos can do okay against some of the wider teams, but when it comes to the other elite teams, their tools are just so lackluster at dealing with them. And this is very much, in my opinion, an elite heavy meta at the moment. And I think what makes a team good, one of the main determining factors of whether you can do well in a tournament is how good you can play against other elite teams, which is, that's part of why I have Casterkin above Hyrotech. Not that Hyrotech are bad there, but I just think Casterkin are a little bit better. Phobos are not terrible against something like Commandos, for instance. I don't think that's like an impossible matchup. But against like Intercession or Legionnaires, you kind of might as well just give up. It's like one of the most brutal matchups in the game, and you're going to be running into those teams very frequently. So all in all, I don't really super love Phobos right now. So yeah. Moving on to the next team in the could use some tweaks category. I'm going to go with Warp Coven. I think I'm putting them above Phobos. I think much like Phobos and Commandos, with a lot of practice and hard work, you can perform well with Warp Coven. That's going to be a common thread here. Just about any team you can perform well with in this game at the current in the current meta. I think this is a pretty good. Like the last Data Slate was really good, I guess is what I'm getting at here. But Warp Coven they recently got buffed, so they can play the elite game a little bit better. But the problem is that I still think they're worse than the other elite teams at the elite game. And against Horde teams, you'd rather go wider anyway with Warp Coven. So it's like you can play like an average 6 model team. It might do well against Phobos, to be honest. That 6 model elite, like all rubric, all sorcerer team, like it might do okay against them, but I don't think it's good enough against Intercession or even Legionnaires. So the buffs there were nice, but a little bit, I think where it really shines is maybe, and I'm not a Warp Coven expert by any means, but it rewards you for taking that icon a little bit more. So I don't know. I think Warp Coven are still somewhat annoying on Into the Dark because of the instability stuff they can do to reduce all your dashes, and hurting that mobility on Into the Dark is very valuable. I think on Into the Dark, mobility is a more important thing than it is on open board. I always said kind of before Into the Dark came out that I felt that mobility, out of all like the main strengths a team could have, that mobility was the least important. And I think Into the Dark kind of flipped that on its head, and I think mobility is now very important, which means it's an ability like the slow that the Warp Coven spell has is a little bit more important. So I think that kind of rounds out the could use some tweaks category. I don't think there's anything else. Well, actually, no, there is one team. And this is kind of a hot take, maybe. I'll put them at the top. Put them at the top here. So Farstalker Kinband. I played this team quite a bit after release, and pretty much up until the last month. Post buff, I know a lot of people are really high on them, and I maintain that I think they're pretty solid. I think they're average, maybe slightly above average on open board. But on Into the Dark, they just really struggle. They don't get a lot of their cool tools. There is like teams that are close to being as wide as them can sometimes, like in the instance of like commandos, if they just go full conceal and just try to play the melee game, group kind of just can't do anything about it. You only have so many ways to walk up and shoot them. And their melee just cannot stack up against them. I think they're really bad against like Corsairs and any mid-sized team. And as far as elites, I just don't think there's enough, like the amount of threats that, like major threats that Farstalker Kinband have against elites is kind of like, it's low enough that the elite player can set up to avoid it for the most part. So this just isn't a matchup. Like if I'm playing an elite team, I'm not super worried about Farstalkers. Personally, they're okay there, not amazing. And I just think Into the Dark is like, they're one of the teams I think that gets hurt the most by playing on Into the Dark. Some teams don't really care. Some teams love Into the Dark. Most teams, it's like a very small change, but I think for Farstalkers, it's kind of brutal. I actually wanted to take them to KTO, but when I found out that the tournament was all ITD, I kind of steered away from that. On open board, they maybe sit like low here or like high here, but ITD, I'm pretty low on Farstalker Kinband. I'd love to see somebody take them and do really well. I don't foresee that happening though. All right, so that rounds out the could use some tweaks category. So now we're going to talk about the balanced teams in my eyes. First and foremost, Blooded. I think Blooded are super balanced. They're better on ITD. They don't strike me as a team that has any, like, they're pretty honest. I don't see them as being particularly unfair in any aspects of the game. They get a lot of bodies, and they have a lot of tools in their toolkit to respond to different play styles. This is absolutely a team, in my opinion, that you can take and do very, very well with. So, I mean, I think they're one of the more balanced teams in the game, period. I think Games Workshop did a pretty good job with Blooded. The ability for them to, lean more into like taking an Ogren and brawling a little bit more rather than, using the strength of just being a horde and having all those bodies. It's an interesting balance to strike for the Blooded player, and in good hands, I think they're going to do very, very well. Okay, next up we have Hunter Clade. So Hunter Clade is a team that's kind of fallen off the map a little bit after their nerfs. They were kind of being taken everywhere, and then they got nerfed, and now they're not getting taken anywhere. I don't think that they're a team that is inherently good or bad on Into the Dark. They probably prefer open just a little bit more just because they have some extra tools they can use. But I think post-nerf, it's hard to say because I don't see them a lot post-nerf, but I think my gut tells me that the nerfs were very good for the health of the team, for the health of the game, I guess. I think somebody could still take Hunter Clade and do quite well. They're not something that I particularly fear in the meta, but in the hands of a good player, I think they could still be quite a force, in my opinion. So, let's move on. Next up, so the thing about the balance teams is there's not a lot to say, in my opinion. I think they're in a pretty good state. Next up, is there another team I want to throw into balance? There is. It's Novitiates. I'm going to put them at the top of balance because I think they are close to being very good on Into the Dark, but they've had their fair share of nerfs a few times down the line. I think one of the ways you can exploit Novitiates is through melee, and it's a little bit easy to create these melee situations on Into the Dark against them. That's not to say that they don't have certain things they really like about Into the Dark. For instance, the double flamers are just monstrous on this format when you give them lethal 5. They do have a few models on their own that are pretty excellent in melee, between the Sister Superior and the the Penitent, I believe it's called. So they've got some solid options. They've still got a great toolkit even after the nerf. And I'm really curious to see if anybody takes Novitiates and performs well at KTO personally. All right, so let's move on to we have one more team I need to put in balanced, and that is Wormblade. I'm going to put them right over here. So Wormblade, I think, are kind of like Blooded in the sense that I find them to be one of the most balanced teams in Kill Team at the moment. They have gone from they haven't ever gotten a buff or nerf since release, and they've also never been like a dominant or terrible team since release. They've gotten stealth nerfs where things got changed in a way that harmed them multiple times, but never a direct nerf. And I think they're pretty much fine. They've got a really cool toolbox. They've got options, which is really important, like whether or not you're going with one cult agent or the other. I think is going to make a huge difference in certain matchups. Being able to use Meticulous Plan for really big, if you're playing on loot, that can be huge. I also really like that the change they made to hiding abilities or deep strike abilities. I think is actually really good. So I like it a lot for teams like Commandos and Wormblade in particular, who have a lot of bodies, like GA2 bodies they can throw forward and play aggressive on points. I'm a fan of Wormblade right now. I don't think that they are exceptional, or I don't think they need any help either. So they're just a good team. All right, so I think, that rounds out the balance territory. From here on out, everything, in my opinion, is quite good. So I'm going to start with Veteran Guard. So this is maybe a hot take because I know people are a little bit low on Veteran Guard, but I think that on Into the Dark, especially with the new crit ops, I think there are certain missions, like mission 3 and 6 in particular, and to a lesser degree 1, where if you're playing on something like loot, Vet Guard is among the best teams suited for that in the whole game, and it becomes really difficult to win if the Vet Guard player knows what they're doing. I think we're going to run into some pretty good Vet Guard performances on Into the Dark. On top of that, I think the Demo Specialist is just so good. Honestly, Vet Guard in general is a team that has a lot of little I don't know if I want to call it combos, but they set up plays across a few different activations. They'll set up one big play that takes a few guys going before it can really go off. And I think the safety of Into the Dark really allows for that to happen just a little bit more safely than it happens on open board. I'm talking you comms buff a demo, you set up, you move and open a door, you then you have the demo run in, plant the mine, dash away, blow it up. These things were all happening on open board, but I think you can do it a little bit safer on Into the Dark, on top of their insane, to be honest, objective control. So I'm pretty high on these guys. All right, moving on. We're going to do Corsairs now. So I think Corsairs, I'm going to put them behind Vet Guard, but I think Corsairs are, in the current climate, the current balance of the game, are probably the best they've ever been, specifically when they're playing on Into the Dark. So I think they do decently with the new crit ops. I think they like the setups. I think they like some of the tac ops. And I think that their mobility, which is their best tool, to be honest, is very, very valuable on Into the Dark, more so than it is on Open. I just think that they have really good very effective ways to put pressure on teams on certain setups, especially elite teams, which I said earlier, I think this is a predominantly elite meta. I think that they have the tools to beat any elite team. So I would rank Corsairs as being very good on Into the Dark at the moment. Okay, so next up in the very good tier, we have Void Dancers, who are quite similar to Corsairs in terms of some of their strengths. They're very good at scoring. They're very good at, they're extremely mobile. I think on Into the Dark, I would consider Corsairs to be slightly more mobile. In fact, I think I like Corsair. I don't know. In the straight up matchup, I like Void Dancers against Corsairs, but against elites, Corsairs are a little bit better. And against hordes, I think Void Dancers are a little bit better. So this one's kind of a wash on which one you like more. I think I'm just going to give it to Voids because I like them in the matchup. But they're close, and I think they're very similar in terms of their strengths at the moment, somewhat, other than the elite disparity. I think they play somewhat of a similar game. Void Dancers have a much lower cognitive load, and they're a little bit easier to play, so there's that. But yeah, I think they're undeniably pretty good right now. Yeah, and I think another thing about Into the Dark is that you don't have to use Domino Field as early as you might have to do on open board. So they're saving that CP a little bit, which is nice as well, especially after the nerf to Domino Field. And ignore these two. We've got 6 teams left. We're going to put Pathfinders in the very good territory. So on open board, I'd still consider them to be maybe on the bottom tier of top of the meta. But the nerf, the -1 operative is huge and needed, in my opinion. I think it makes them a lot more fair to play against. I probably would consider Pathfinders below Vetguard, in my opinion. I just think the GA2 shenanigans from Vetguard kind of edge them above on Into the Dark on some of these missions. Much like Vetguard, Vetguard have a little bit of melee, not a lot, but Pathfinders have absolutely none. Their deep strike plays are pretty much gone. So you're just kind of having to rely on the fact that, this is a strong team with a deep toolbox that, despite some nerfs, is still very, very good and punches very, very hard. Not punches, but shoots very, very hard. And yeah, I really like them. So Pathfinders, quite good in my opinion. Last team in the very good territory, and this is very, very close to being top of the meta for me, and that is Legionnaires. So Legionnaires, in my eyes, are they are really good against intercession, which I think is very important. And I think they're pretty solid on most of the setups into almost any horde team. There's a few setups where I think that they struggle a little bit against horde teams. But as long as you can avoid those and get the right, don't draw loot or something against one of the few teams that I can really punish you there, one of the few maps that can really punish you there, I think that Legionnaires are very well poised to perform amazingly well. It's debatable whether or not you could put them up at the top of the meta category. I think there's a decent argument for it, but I'm going to put them at the top of very good. I consider them a top 5 team on Into the Dark. I just think that they can play so aggressively and set up so well, and they are just monsters. So, especially with Nurgle, in my opinion. I know some people like Tzeentch. We saw Tzeentch do pretty well at LVO, but Nurgle is reliability incarnate with this team, and I really value that. All right, next up, we're going to the top of the meta where we have 4 teams left. So these are the 4 teams that I consider to be the best of the best right now in Into the Dark. So let's start with Intercession. Intercession are so one of the reasons Legionnaires I value them so much is because they are probably the best team in the game against Intercession, debatably, at least up there. And I think Intercession are both A, very common, especially in Into the Dark, and B, very strong. They kind of are along the lines of how Void Dancers have a low cognitive load. Intercession are very similar to that, but I think they're better. And I think they play very well against other horde teams. And I don't want to make it sound like Legionnaires auto win against Intercession. Intercession still hit hard enough to make Legionnaires occasionally, sweat a little bit. And yeah, no, I mean, I think Intercession are just nuts. Like methodical, rapid, or methodical, durable, whichever one you go with. So good on Into the Dark. And they're going to be super common too. I don't know if they'll win in KTO, just because we haven't seen like a ton of huge wins outside of like Adrian, who is not going to KTO unfortunately. So, but still, I mean, you're going to see them all over. They're going to do pretty well. I mean, if anything, their win rate gets kind of dragged down by the fact that they're so accessible that like a lot of new players run them. And they're so common that they mirror match into each other a lot, into themselves a lot, I guess I should say, which also like lowers their win rate to the medium, the 50%. But yeah, don't let anything fool you. Intercession in good hands are terrifying. Okay, next up we have Gellerpox. So Gellerpox are kind of a nightmare team, both literally and figuratively. They are so scary. I think they score very well. I think they just pose problems. They're like the one true melee horde, like true pure melee horde in Kill Team right now as far as bespoke teams go. And they just like, they're just so good. Like, I don't know, they're so effective. They're so hard to punch through. And they hit so hard themselves if you can set up well. There are some teams that just do not have the firepower to take care of the Nightmare Hulks. And a lot of teams also don't have the control ability to contain them and stop them from getting their tech infection and their security tac ops, whatever it is they decide to take. They scare me. I think that there are ways to play against them that the community hasn't quite like narrowed down yet, but in good hands, Gellerpox are debatably the best team in the game. I don't think they're the number one, but there's arguments to be made. Next up is Novice Breachers. So Novice Breachers are kind of considered the like de facto number one, but I don't think results are supporting that. I look at the team with my own eyeballs and I see like, okay, yes, this is insane. They're probably the most likely team to get nerfed next data slate. And I don't know, like it's definitely warranted, but also like, I don't know, Novice Breachers are, as far as like, they're considered, I think, by a lot of people to be the best team in the game right now. And as far as like all of the de facto best teams we've had, this is like the least scary to me. Like when you go back to when the game came out, at first it was Talons that were just unbeatable, and then they got nerfed, and then Vetguard were just horrifying for a while. And then, Novitiates, Pathfinders, anything that has come out since then. This is the least scary best team we've had. I don't even know if they're the best team right now. So that being said, they have an unreal toolbox. They have stupid durability on their models. Some of these operatives should be dying a little bit faster than they are. And on top of that, the blitz ability is just like, I mean, if you set up a blast play and you win initiative, you kind of just win the game with the Grenadier. It's pretty silly. So there's a few things that probably need tweaking, but they are by no means, they don't feel unfair to me, I guess. Relatively speaking, they're quite good. They're obviously, I think they're quite good. I have them all the way up here. But yeah, no, I mean, I have nothing to take away from Novice Breachers. So number one team in the game, this is going to get, people are going to hate me for this take probably, and I'm sure there's going to be some disagreement here, but I think Star Striders are cracked right now. I think they're the best team in the game personally. I've been actively trying to play games against good players running all these teams, and the toolbox that Star Striders have is just, I mean, it's horrifying. They can do so much. They have so many options. Their strategic ploys are so good. Their tactical ploys are so good. The only thing I can take away from them is they are a little top heavy, where they have, it's not to the level of like a Wormblade, but like there's a few operatives on the Star Striders team where if you kill them, the game gets really hard for the Star Strider player. But these models are on Into the Dark anyway, can be kept safe very easily. If you do kill them, well, I think they're very decently equipped to play against elite teams now that they got the buff to their artillery. Before that, it was very iffy on whether or not they'd be able to actually, get those kills when they need to. But now, like, if you're playing against any team, even Intercession, an Archaeotech beam is like a delete a model 2 times a game, basically, attack. So that's huge. I think against other Horde teams, they are equipped pretty much fine to punish both through their artillery, which I really don't think should be hitting on 3s on the blast attacks. That's just too good in my opinion. And the fact that their regular operatives don't struggle as much into those types of teams as they do against elites. So like with the buffs, they can punish elites in ways that they couldn't before, and they can keep their strong operatives safe on Into the Dark. And then you pair that with just like bonkers ploys, a really deep toolkit, really cool interactions. This is not an easy team to play by any means, but I think they're the best in the game right now in the hands of a top player. So and they're kind of the team that I fear the most going into KTO. So are they going to win KTO? I don't know. They didn't win LVO, and they're, same team that I'm talking about. It's just on open board. So I don't know. I think with really good players taking them, like we're seeing over in Spain with Ace running them, they're dominant. And there's not a huge sample size, but since the buffs, they have the highest win rate in the game by a pretty decent margin. They have like a 65% win rate or something bonkers like that. Again, not a huge sample size, and I've gone on my soapbox and complained about citing win rates, but if you're somebody that cares about win rates, there you go. And they're also doing pretty well in podiums too since the buffs. So this team is just bonkers good. I love their toolkit. I think they probably need a nerf as well as Navis Breachers. So I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what happens at KTO. But this is my outlook right now on the meta, on the Into the Dark meta specifically. So shout out to everybody listening. If you stumbled upon this, enjoyed it, whatever, and you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. We're on the road to 8,000 now, which is only 2,000 below 10,000. So I mean, hey, that's a big number. And shout out to, of course, to everybody over at patreon.com/commandpoint. You guys are the coolest and best, and everybody at our YouTube membership program as well. If you want to support us a little bit more, you can go over there to either one of those, and for as little as $1 a month, $12 a whole year, which is like nothing, you can show us a little more support, and we would hold a debt to you forever. So this is Shane from Command Point talking about Into the Dark, laying out a new tier list. Hope you enjoyed it. Signing out.